Hello and welcome to Dream Deals, the show that takes your automotive dreams and turns them into reality. Well, for me at least. Now, in this week's show, we're doing something a bit different. We're not just looking at one car maker, but three. In fact, the three biggest in the world. Yes, this week we're looking at classic and future Yank tanks from General Motors, Chrysler and Ford. Although the world's first car was designed and built by Carl Benz in Germany, to many it was Henry Ford who really got the industry moving with his Model T. What's that famous line? You can have any colour as long as it's black. But even with rather limited choice of colours, the American car industry flourished. Uncle Henry, however, didn't have it all his own way, because he was quickly joined by Oldsmobile, Cadillac, Buick, General Motors and of course Chrysler. Today, America is not only the world's largest producer of cars, but is also home to the world's most powerful car manufacturers, General Motors and Ford. Now, the heyday of the American motor industry was the late 1950s, and no car epitomised this time more than this beautiful Cadillac Coupe de Ville. It's beautiful, but huge. It comes from a time when size and power really did matter. Look at those lethal, sharp, aggressive side fins, and the masses of chrome all over the car. Then there's this bonnet or hood, 3 square miles, enough to play football on, or soccer. Stereotypes don't come much better than the DeVille. It's everything that we all expect American cars to be. It's got more metal than a Sheffield steelworks, enough sharp edges to match even the greatest Japanese samurai, and the interior so big that you could fit in all of the Brady Bunch and still have enough room for the Simpsons. Now, one of the first things you'll notice about the Coupe de Ville is its size. It's not just big, it's huge. I'm well over 6 foot and I can nearly lie horizontal across the car. Who needs a Winnebago? But that, in a sense, is one of the problems with the car. Why would anyone have a car that's so big? I just don't get it. What's that old saying about the bigger a car, the smaller a man's tackle? Well, I've never actually understood that because I've never been into fishing. Now, for a big car, you're going to need a big engine. And here the DeVille doesn't disappoint. Underneath the seemingly endless bonnet is a 3.9 V8, putting out 325 brake horsepower. Just like any American car, don't go expecting great fuel economy, because you won't get it. Especially as the DeVille weighs just over 2 tons. In fact, you'd be lucky to average between 10 and 12 miles to the gallon. Now, the DeVille over the years, like many American cars, has lost its unmistakable road presence. Gone are the fins and chromework, and in their place, bland, large, flat panels, making the modern Cadillacs just like any other large American car. Now, no offence to Hyundai, but if I was designing and building a luxury cruiser, I wouldn't have used the XG30 as my starting point. Now, the good news is we're not going to show you how you can get your hands on a Blandmobile. No, we're going to give you some tips on how to buy your very own beauty like this one. Here's Ian Royal.
Now, like many classic cars, finding good second-hand examples is quite hard. But being American, this task is even more difficult. We've been looking pretty hard and managed to find a 1956 coupe for just under £30,000. Because pickings are so slim here in the UK, one option you could try is importing a model from America. Thanks to the internet, sourcing a good example is now much easier.
Well, this car was bought in a scrapyard from Atlanta in Georgia. It was full of bullet holes. Somebody decided they'd had enough of it. It was parked 3 cars, piled up 3 cars high. The guy thought I was absolutely mad when I went in the scrapyard to buy it and ship it over here. Anyway, I shipped it over and took me a few years to rebuild it. And I've rebuilt it to its pretty. It still wants a few bits and pieces doing to it yet. You know, time will come.
Contrary to what you might think, finding replacement parts for your Yank tank isn't that difficult. Again, mainly due to advances in technology. Example prices for parts are a piston set, that's a cool £240, while a nice clean dipstick will be yours for just £55.
Around the time that Cadillac were making the DeVille, Ford started reaching for the skies with their Skyliner, a car that offered something a little bit different. Visually, the Skyliner stayed with the trends of the time, with acres of chrome, masses of metal and enough fins to give even Steven Spielberg nightmares. But where it differed was in its fully retractable hard top. Although this had been seen in earlier cars such as the Chrysler Thunderbolt and Gaylord Gladiator, Ford was the first company to mass produce it. Now, sadly, the car wasn't a huge success. Ironically, one of the reasons for this was its main selling point, the roof. Now this was 1959. Remember, materials and technology aren't what they are today. It took over 600 feet of wiring and 7 motors to get the roof up and down. Still, on the bright side, it did take a total of 60 seconds to get it down. Long enough to get you drenched in the Manchester rain. There we go, instant. Despite offering greater convenience, increases in weight and price and questionable reliability meant that the Skyliner didn't reach the heady heights Ford had hoped it would. Now as you slide your way into the Skyline, you find yourself not so much on a seat as on a sofa. You see, the Americans, unlike us Europeans, liked a car they could call a home from home, a place to sit and watch the world go by as they drove along in a very straight line. Inside here there are no intrusions, there's the drive shaft on the floor, and everything is clearly laid out on the dash, including here this, the gear stick. Now of course all of this space could come in handy for one thing, that's taking a lady to the drive-in. Now in 1959 the Skyliner was dropped following poor sales and questions over the reliability of the retractable roof. But Ford stuck with the concept, putting the prototype into both the Thunderbird and the Mustang. Now, despite those concerns, this car is still considered an all-time American classic. And if you want to get your hands on some Americana, here's Ian Royal with some of the pros and cons.
The Skyliner was years ahead of its time with its retractable roof, and so is very desirable amongst American car fans. But how much should you expect to pay? Well, we found a fully restored 1959 retractable Skyliner for an astonishing £69,000. But if this is a little out of your range and restoration is your thing, then how about another 1959 model, this time in need of work, for £4,000?
It's a car I've always wanted. I mean, it's a flip top. You just don't. Have you ever seen one yourself before? I bet the answer is no. It's just one of them rare, nice cars. As a lot of people think they're expensive to run. They're not really. If you drive them sensible, you know, you get quite a good 18, 20 to the gallon, which isn't too bad. And they run on 2-star, unleaded, so there's no problems with them whatsoever.
If you are restoring, or you have a bump in your pride and joy, how much will parts cost? Well, with nearly 400 feet of cable and plenty of electric motors to keep it running, something is bound to go wrong with that roof. A rear roof lock motor wire will cost you £60, and a top circuit breaker, a snip, at a mere £9.
That's all for part 1, but join us after the break when we'll be continuing our look at classic Americana. I'll be driving Chrysler's interpretation of an all-American hot rod for the family, the PT Cruiser, and we see what gas guzzler's Uncle Sam has got in store for us in the future. We'll see you in a couple of shakes. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of our Dream Deals American Car Special. Still to come in this part, we take a look at a modern US classic, or at least that's what Chrysler would have you believe, the PT Cruiser. We look at just how big and brash American cars can get, but first, a modern 70s and 80s icon, a car so of its time when personal excess was at its peak, a car unmistakably American, the Corvette Stingray. Whilst most American cars could be accused of being quite brash and even ugly, the Stingray is in fact very elegant and curvaceous. In some lights you can even say it looked a bit like a stingray. But here's the really interesting thing, better cover your ears here Enzo, I think that the Stingray wouldn't look silly with a Ferrari badge on the bonnet. Strange, but true. Now there is a saying that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Well, with this Stingray it simply doesn't apply, because one look at it tells you all you need to know. This car is made for power and performance. Just look at those raised, front flared wheel arches housing massive rubber tyres and chrome wheels. And underneath that bonnet, there's no performance enhancers, no turbos, no superchargers, just one Neanderthal cast iron V8 engine. And it goes like the wind. Despite being fitted with a 5.7 litre engine, performance figures differed greatly during the Stingray's life. Because of changing emissions legislation in the US, power outputs vary from a relatively low 205 brake up to 250. The best 0 to 60 time was around 6.5 seconds. There's no denying that the Corvette Stingray is one of the most recognisable and desirable American cars ever. It's just a shame that it lived in a time when technology couldn't live with the environmental demands placed upon it. But could you imagine a car that looked this good with modern Corvette technology? Still, there are plenty of them about. So here's Ian Royal with a guide on what to look for and what not to.
You don't have to be an American car fan for the Corvette to strike a chord. It's a combination of classic American muscle car styling and outrageous performance, and that's what makes it a favourite. So how much will you pay? Well, at the top end of the market, we found a 1963 convertible with 73,000 miles for 28 grand. Slightly cheaper, we also found a 1972 hardtop with 87,000 miles on the clock for a little over 15 grand. Parts for the Corvette are fairly easy to come across, but that doesn't mean they're cheap. A set of exhaust pipes will cost you £344, a front disc brake £827, and a set of reproduction wheels will set you back a breathtaking £1,034.
Now, Chrysler's PT Cruiser has been around for a couple of years now, and yet it's still a relatively rare sight on our roads. Reason for that is probably down to one of two reasons. Either it's a niche model that only appeals to the practical nonconformists who want to stand out in Tesco's car park amongst the Zafiras and Scenics, or it's because it's a downright pig-ugly car, a hot rod wannabe with a diesel engine. Now, there's no denying that the PT Cruiser is one of those cars that you either love or hate. You can either appreciate its retro hot rod styling or think that what was an interesting design concept perhaps should have stayed one. You can either sneer admiringly at the aggressive grille at the front, or you can tut-tut as to why anyone would be so devoid of attention in their personal lives that they would feel the need to drive a PT Cruiser. Either way, it's pig ugly. Inside, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on the way you look at it, the exterior styling is not reflected. In fact, like John Major and Edwina Curry, it's a rather bland affair with not very particularly good plastics abounding and only a half-hearted attempt at interior styling tweaks with the colour-coded dial surrounds and the interior dash insert. In the back, to get two fully grown adults in there for a long journey, they're going to have to be very good friends. At least they would be good friends by journey's end. Now, the PT Cruiser certainly looks the part, but does it drive the part? Now's the time to find out. Now, performance in this, the 2-litre 4-cylinder Cruiser, is actually quite nice. You get 140 brake horsepower. It'll go from 0 to 60 in just over 10 seconds and on up to 112 miles per hour. But there is a diesel derivative of the Cruiser, and whilst it offers a few horsepower less and a second longer to get from 0 to 60, it actually offers a lot more low-down torque and is a lot more fun to drive. Handling-wise, the Cruiser is actually quite good fun. There is quite a bit of body roll when you corner hard, and I really wouldn't want to test out its grip cornering fast because it's not quite understeer, but there is a lack of front wheel grip. But it is fun in straight lines nonetheless, and the mid-range power is there. But I do have a problem with this upright driving position that you get in mini MPVs. I do feel like I'm driving a van. I feel like I should have a sliding door and a red top tabloid in the front of the car and probably express right-wing views about asylum seekers and, whoa, look at that, at girls as you pass by. It's that kind of a car. It feels like a van. My only other major concern with this car is the price. All right, we're driving the top of the range one today, the 2 litre with its air conditioning, CD player, cruise control, fully electric, colour-coded interior, nice leather seats. But it does come in at just over £18,000, and I just think that's too much to pay for a car like this. Now, I've been quite negative about the PT Cruiser, but let me stress how pleased we all should be that this car exists at all, because its design is bold and is brave, obviously. And this in a world where car manufacturers seem to be lazily copying over each other's shoulders and getting no inspiration whatsoever. The jury is still out whether this car will be a classic, but for the time being, well, I think it's still a bit big ugly, to be honest with you. Now, during the 80s and early 90s, the American car industry went through what can only be described as a lean spell. While still big and powerful, they were about as exciting as a cold bowl of custard. Then, towards the end of the decade, Chrysler took the brave decision to launch a car that would get even the laziest Americans out of their armchair. The first car to come from the biggest ever merger in automotive history, the Crossfire, is a perfect blend of American muscle car and Mercedes elegance. The coupe first debuted as a well-received concept at the 2001 Detroit Motor Show, and by the 2002 LA show, a production version was shown. The name Crossfire was conceived during the design process and apparently refers to the car's distinctive character line as it crosses from a positive form to a negative one. Well, I don't know about that, but I do know it looks fantastic, a rare combination of handsome aggression and sleek style. The car successfully combines European sports car elegance with American muscle car flair, wide shoulders, long bonnet and low slung body, creating a menacing stance, finished off with massive 18-inch alloys. It will be built by Carman in Germany and will be comprised of nearly 40% Mercedes parts, including its engine and transmission, with Chrysler having more influence on the design of the car. Route 66 meets the Autobahn is how Chrysler have described it. Inevitably, some changes have been made to the concept that first appeared at the Detroit show 2 years ago. You get a revised front end and a more sedate interior, but it's still an appealing car on paper. A 3.2 litre V6 engine coupled to either a 6-speed manual or 5-speed auto box, producing 215 brake, all sitting on the same chassis as a Mercedes CLK. It's rear-wheel drive, as you'd expect, and performance is admirable if not breathtaking. 0 to 60 in 5.9 seconds and a top speed of 148 miles per hour. Mercedes' influence is felt in the safety features on the car too. You get an electronic stability program which integrates brake application and throttle intervention for yaw control, and ignition and throttle intervention for wheel control. Very clever indeed. Final prices have yet to be announced, but it will be keenly priced amongst its competition, namely the Audi TT, Porsche Boxster and Mercedes' own CLK. The Crossfire will have to do very well to outhandle the Boxster, but it could become this year's must-have accessory in place of the last year TT. Now, Chrysler have a long history of producing unconventional production cars, and the Crossfire is certainly no exception. However, with the intervention of Mercedes, Chrysler have hopefully got over the problems of slightly dubious build quality.
Like its famous namesake, the all-new GT40 is designed to be a true supercar, and with a 5.4 litre V8 producing 500 brake horsepower and nearly 500 pounds per foot of torque, it certainly sounds like the GT40 will live up to expectations, if it ever goes into production, that is. Ford are being very cagey, saying that the car was always designed with production feasibility, but will not confirm any production plans for the car. Despite inevitable comparisons with the original, the GT40 differs from the 60s classic in many ways. It shares not a single dimension, standing a foot longer and 4 inches taller, begging the question that surely it should have been called the GT44. Anyway, never mind details like that. The car looks fantastic and goes like stink, so I for one urge Ford to build it.
Resurrecting another 60s classic, Ford recently unveiled these beauties. Designed as concepts for next year's all-new Mustang, the two-seat coupe and convertible are directly inspired by the Mustang 1 concept of the 1960s. Although these cars will not go into production, they are said to be strong indicators of the design direction that next year's car will take, and show Ford's desire to satisfy Mustang enthusiast appetites for a performance-inspired legend evolving from 40 years of Mustang heritage.
The Mustang GT concepts draw on the elements that have made Mustang the definitive American sports car for nearly 4 decades. Their exterior designs are clearly inspired by some of the classic Mustangs of the past, highlighting what Mustang means to so many people. The original 1964 Mustang actually evolved from the racing-inspired 2-seat concept car called the Mustang 1. And the design team responsible for these concepts did the same, looking beyond production models to the Mustang 1 concept for model inspiration. Much like the Mustang 1 and the later Mustang Mach-1 show car in 1968, the Mustang GT concepts are rare, radical designs that will appeal to everyone. Ford's Living Legends design studios in California have brilliantly managed to create a car that is both unmistakably Mustang and thoroughly modern, with classic design cues such as C-scoops in the side panels, element rear lights, and of course the galloping pony in the front grille. And the pony's not alone, it's brought 400 friends along with it, courtesy of the supercharged 4.6-litre V8 under the bonnet. Inside, there's no mistaking the no-holds-barred Mustang classic cues. The cockpit is dramatic for the driver and passenger, with lush red and charcoal leather and aluminium trim to the dash and console surrounds. They're reminiscent of another era yet, inside and out. The Mustang GT concepts are thoroughly modern. There you have it, the great American car industry, or at least a sneaky peek at it. The programme was only 25 minutes long, let's face it. Over the years, America have given us some genuine classics, but recently they've given us plenty of turkeys too. But the signs are there that the Americans are rediscovering their love of beautiful, fast cars, the Crossfire, the new Mustang and the GT40. Well, that's all for this week on Dream Deals, but we'll see you again soon.